it seems like the chicken was broken and then mended. So what happens is the egg usually cracks in the shell gland, and then it's repaired before it's laid. So it's cracked, and then there's more calcium that's put on it, and so you have these raised areas around the egg. And that too, we see a lot in older hens. Again, stress is a factor always. If hens are stressed by weather, they're stressed by poor nutrition, then you will see changes in the eggs. And then you have the misshapen eggs. Usually the shell gland is immature, as in young pullets just starting to lay. Those are really funny. The first 1 or 2 weeks when pullets start laying, you see some really funny shaped eggs. You see tiny, tiny eggs, peewees. You see misshapen eggs. This is the oviduct just maturing, So the shell glands are still very immature. They're not producing the calcium as well as they should. And then there are diseases that can cause it too. Bronchitis and Newcastle have a predilection, not just for the respiratory tract, but also for the reproductive tract. So we see those changes. White banded eggs. I've seen eggs like this before, many times. This is when normal classification is interrupted when 2 eggs come into contact with each other. Usually it's only 1 egg in the tube, but once in a while, something tells the bird's brain to release 2 yolks. So the first yolk goes in, and then the egg starts to be formed, and then another yolk comes in. So you have these 2 eggs that are in the shell gland at the same time, and then the first egg that is retained will have this extra layer of calcium, because the other one was laid, and then there's one that has an extra band. So the way you offer them light, chickens are very sensitive to light, especially in the commercial system. Stress can release 2 eggs instead of 1, 2 yolks, and many, many diseases can do that. Both bacterial and viral will push the chickens to release 2 or more yolks instead of 1. And then you have the one that's called slab-sided egg, where you already have 1 egg that's all done, and then another one enters into the shell gland area. So that one is not as complete as the first egg, and then where they make contact, you have this flat area. This is very similar to the white banded egg. Some of the shell surface things that we see, defects in eggs, and you can see more of them on that website that I talked about, the Alltech website. They talk about the most common 20 defects. But now we're going to be talking about internal egg quality. So quality is about the shell, it's about the internal quality, and mostly when we talk about internal quality, we're looking at the protein, the albumin, or white of the egg. So the albumin can tell us how fresh an egg is. We talk about the meat spots and the blood spots that some of you were asking me about at the end of the last talk. We estimate albumin quality using a measurement called the Hoare unit. The Hoare unit measures the thickness of the albumin, and that tells us the protein quality of the egg. And so they grade it according to the albumin, and the scores, if you have a score greater than 72, that's an A, and then there's a grade A, grade B, and a grade C. If you have anything less than a 30, it's a grade C. Now, who's concerned about albumin quality? The restaurant industry. Very, very concerned, especially if they're using fresh eggs. You don't want to break an egg open and see the white running out. The albumin is supposed to be thick around the yolk. So albumin quality will decline with age, with storage. And there are diseases such as infectious bronchitis that can cause changes in the albumin quality. The genetics of the hen can cause changes in albumin. the age, the older they get, the worse the albumin quality is. Temperature, very high temperatures, you will see watery eggs. Even if they're fresh from the nest, you break them open and you see watery albumin. And the humidity, very high humidity also can affect the albumin in the eggs. So this is the machine that's used to measure the height of the albumin and how thick it is. And it's called the whole unit measurements. Someone with the last name Hall in 1937 came up with this measurement. And it's still used today in the poultry industry to determine egg quality, internal egg quality. So this is what we see. This is a really good egg. It's fresh, and it has a tight albumin around the yolk when you break it. And here, it's watery. You break it, and then the albumin just flows. And someone was asking me about this. This is what I was calling the chalaza. This is not a worm. When you break open an egg, you see this white stringy thing. It's a chalaza. It is the part of the yolk that attaches to the shell membrane. So there are a lot of albumin defects, and one of the most common ones is called a meat spot. People complain about this. So supermarkets get very worried when 2 or 3 people complain about meat spots, so they call the farmer and say, our clients are complaining that your eggs have a lot of meat spots. But to tell you the truth, meat spots are just the lining of the oviduct can be shed into the egg during egg formation. And the lining usually has blood vessels. So it appears sometimes brown, reddish brown, and it's usually near the yolk. And sometimes it can be partially broken down blood spots. I'll talk about blood spots later. You have meat spots and blood spots. Meat spots are a lot thicker. They look really bad when you boil your eggs, you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me. I eat them. It's just protein. But because I know what they are, people that buy it at the store don't know what they are. Yes. Yeah, that's a meat spot. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with eating those eggs. Maybe what kind of chicken do you have? Brown? Is it a brown bird?
I have a variety, but mostly half of my flock is red.
The red sexling? Yeah, they do that a lot.
Okay.
Genetically, I don't know why, they always have those meat spots. And then sometimes you have a small spot of blood on the yolk, because the yolk, when you look at a yolk, when they open up these birds, they have really beautiful blood vessels around the yolk. Sometimes when the yolk is released, those blood vessels break, and you get the blood spots. So not all the time, but there are some types of birds, the brown birds especially, seem to be genetically prone to producing blood spots. Sometimes it's because you don't have enough vitamin A and vitamin K. Some sulfur drugs can cause it. If you put lucerne meal in your chicken diet or give it to them as a supplement, you can have a lot more blood spots because it causes bleeding. And vitamin K can also cause bleeding because it disrupts the clotting factors. So moldy feed, some toxins can cause extra bleeding of blood vessels. And if you have too much light in the coop, and of course, as usual, stress. Stress is just as important to chickens as it is to humans. You don't want to stress your chickens out too much. If the weather is bad, try to keep them in a safe, nice coop. Don't let them run around in minus 45-degree weather because they get stressed out. So usually the blood spots are seen on the yolk. And like I said, it looks bad when people see it. Sometimes people you don't want to eat a fried egg with a blood spot on it. But really there's nothing nutritionally bad about it. Lucerne is a type of grass, and sometimes people use it as like an extra protein source. I don't know whether it's from the same family as alfalfa. And you can use it they use it to make like a meal to add to poultry feed in certain parts of the US. So it seems to have some kind of properties that can cause blood vessels to rupture. And then sometimes you can see yolks as pale as that. People hate pale yolks. I mean, light yellow yolks, people hate that. They want their yolks to be really bright yellow, you know. And the reason why yolks are yellow is because of a pigment called xanthophyll. These are yellow to red pigments that are usually in the diet. So if birds have access to the outdoors, like all the grasses, you know, have xanthophylls in them. Even lucerne, I'm talking about lucerne, that's why people use it, because it makes lucerne, alfalfa, any kind of grass have lots of xanthophylls, and they will make that yolk yellow. If you even feed maize, you know, maize, yellow corn, you will have deeper colored yolks. But sometimes you have to add something to the feed to give it that really nice yellow color, and marigold is the best.
Tell me, why are European eggs so much darker than our eggs? I mean, they're deep.
Extract.
Do they feed
In
them?
most of Europe, they have a lot of their birds outside. In fact, in 2012, they banned the use of cages in Europe. So all their birds, cages for the commercial. So they have to have their birds outside. That's part of the EU mandate. So they spend a lot of time outside, they eat a lot, but I think they also may be adding marigold. You can add natural plants to the diet to make the eggs yellow.
It's the actual flower.
The actual flower. Yeah. So there are other additives, they're all natural, that can be added to make yolks very yellow. So it helps deepen the color, but if you have a defect in, or you don't have enough xanthophyll in the diet, you're going to have white yolks. I've never seen a white yolk before, so I don't know where they got this picture from. Sometimes you have discolored yolks that look bluish green. If you feed anything that has cottonseed oil, people like to give snacks to their chickens. So some of these snacks are usually like potato chips fried in cottonseed oil. And you can see a change in the yolk. Sometimes chickens that are outside might get into some poisonous plants that can cause a yolk to change. Now, double yolks. This is one big double yolk. It's almost as big as this jar of jam. When more than one yolk matures and gets released at the same time, sometimes that happens when they're very young. Their brains are still not tuned to this egg laying, so they release two yolks at the same time instead of one. And you have two yolks inside that egg. So you have these two yolks, and then you have to have the shell laid around it. You have to have two albumin. You have to have the shell membrane, and you get these huge eggs. Seen mostly with very young birds. Sometimes you have these oddities. Sometimes I get pictures that people send me that tell me, oh, I have this egg and it looks like a human embryo. It's not a human embryo. Chicken embryos don't look like this. Actually, they told me, oh, we have this egg, it looks like an embryo. I said, this is not an embryo. Have you seen a chicken embryo? It doesn't look like this. It has a lot of blood vessels. So I sent them pictures of the chicken embryo, how it grows from day 1 all the way to 21. And it doesn't look anything like this. You see it on top of the yolk. It's not this whitish blob. I think this is just some kind of yolk material that there was some disease or something, some bacteria worked on it, and it's like shows up as this blob. And so people get really, really concerned when they see these oddities. And sometimes you can see an egg within an egg. And this usually happens, this probably was laid by a very young bird that's just coming into lay. They lay these peewees. But usually there's a lot of movement of the oviduct. So this egg was probably sitting, waiting to be laid. And then there's this other yolk coming down and into the uterus. And the uterus is moving all the time. So it just sucks back this little one in, and then it lays a shell all around the two of them. So people have broken up their eggs and they found another egg in there. Those are cute. The oddities, finding a worm inside your egg. And the reason why it occurs is we call these aberrant worms because they're in the intestines. The intestines, where it empties out for the feces to go out, where the egg comes out of, they're around the same area. They're coming from different openings. But sometimes, because the oviduct is moving so much, that movement of peristalsis pulls in the worm from the intestines back into the oviduct, and we see it from time to time. Like I said before, this is a PR nightmare for any company that is selling eggs to the public. You don't want this. They get really panicked when this happens. So they do a lot to make sure that these worms levels are down, especially those people doing organic. You're having these birds on the floor. Cage-free birds tend to have a lot more worms. Birds that go outside tend to have a lot more worms than birds in cages, because the birds in cages don't have access to their feces. You need the eggs, and the whole cycle is right there on the ground. There are a lot of eggs that are in the feces. Chickens pick them up, and they go in, and they go through these larval stages, and they come back out as eggs in the feces. So you have to keep the area clean. You have to keep your coops clean to prevent this. If you have a high infestation of worms, you're going to probably find one of them inside your eggs.
So yesterday when we did the physiology class, the UConn professor saw 10 worms, and he said it's normal, that every chicken has.
Yes, I said that too, that all the laying hens that I open up in our diagnostic lab for necropsy, most of them will have roundworms. Most of the time they don't cause any problems, they're just sitting there. But there are some that have lots and lots of them. And I showed a photo of that. And those are the ones that will probably have one aberrant worm that will be sucked up into the oviduct. It's normal to have them. Especially if birds are outside, you will see, you don't want too many of them. We've had birds sent to us, they were dying because of a severe infestation of worms. A few worms might not hurt, but a lot will kill them and will affect their production. Tapeworms, I call them very mild, they just sit there, they just sit in the intestines and they just share the food. They don't cause any pathology, but roundworms will cause pathology if there are too many of them. Now this one was a case that someone sent to me. Actually the owners, because the nice thing about the United States, we can trace any egg. If it's coming from a commercial establishment, there's a number that's given to it. Even if it's sold in Alaska, we can trace it. If it comes from New York and is sold to someone else, and that person sells it to someone else, as long as it's in the original package, we will know where that egg comes from. So a New York producer sent me this because someone in Pennsylvania bought their eggs, and they opened the eggs, and we saw these black things there. And I talked to the owner. They asked me to talk to the person, so I had to question her. I said, "You have some black pepper lying around when you cracked open those eggs?" Because that's what it looked like to me. It looked like black pepper. And she swore up and down, no, there was no black pepper. So we sent it up to a lab, and they looked under the microscope. It didn't look like anything. So I touched it, and you know what it looked like to me? We never finally determined what it was, but she never found any of the other eggs like this. To me, it looks like digested calcium chips. There are calcium chips that look black, and when they're digested, when you see it coming out in the feces sometimes, or in the gizzard, that's exactly what they look like. They were very grainy, very rough. And I have a feeling some of this was just pulled out. Like I said, the oviduct is very active. it goes through peristalsis, it goes up and down, and sometimes these things are sitting, waiting to be released in the vent area, and the oviduct just sucks it up. And I think that's probably what happened here, because this looked like tiny, tiny pieces of calcium chips. But we don't know how to prove that. But the person who bought the eggs was very concerned, and the company that sold the eggs was very concerned. We were able to work it out. We talked to the lady. I said, this is my hunch, this is what happened, and she was fine with it.